Chapter 9. Changes. The children sadly waved goodbye to their little house in the city, which would later come to be known as the Lighthouse. Dad and Mom had decided that their growing family needed a bigger house, so they decided to move a few miles out of the city into Shillington. "I'm going to miss our old house," Angela looked back wistfully as they drove away. "But the new house has a big yard," Brian grinned. "That makes it better than the old house." Soon all the boxes were unpacked and the new house began to feel like home. In March of 1974, baby Marcus joined the family. Brian looked down at the little bundle in the crib. "I thought you'd be able to play with me." His voice held a tone of disappointment. Dad laughed and said, "Have a little patience. He will soon be able to play ball." One day, Shirley came home, nearly bursting with news to tell the family. By now, she was an EKG technician at the hospital and was all grown up. "Everyone sit down," she blushed slightly. "Do you remember when I talked about my coworker, Jonathan?" Dad and Mom nodded their heads. "Yes, he is the nice young man who works in the operating room, right?" "Yes." Shirley paused to catch her breath. "He asked me on a date." Mom stood up and hugged her. "That's exciting, Shirley." "He seems like a great guy. I'm happy for you," Dad added. Everything seemed to be going well for Shirley and Jonathan for a while, but after a few months had passed, Shirley arrived home in tears. "What's wrong?" Mom asked. Her forehead wrinkled with concern. Shirley collapsed onto the couch. "It's all over between Jonathan and me," she managed to stammer between her sobs. The next morning, she stood by the door with her suitcases in hand. Her eyes were red from crying all night. The children gathered around her. "Where are you going, Shirley?" "Can I go on a trip too? Please?" Brian wondered. Shirley patted his head. "No, not this time, buddy." She then looked at Mom and Dad, who had also joined her by this time. "I need to get away. I'm going to find a place to live where I can make a new start and won't be surrounded with memories of Jonathan." "Don't make such a hasty decision, Shirley. Give it some time." Mom clasped Shirley's hand tightly. Shirley shook her head. "No, it's time. I need to do this. I'm old enough now to make my own decisions." The family silently watched from the porch as Shirley loaded her suitcases into her car and drove away. Diane and Angela were crying and sniffling. Brian watched with concern as tears rolled down Mom and Dad's faces. Shirley had proved to be a real blessing. Among other things, she had driven Diane out of the city many mornings to meet transportation to a Christian school. Shirley moving out would once again bring changes to the family. The children gathered around Mom. It was cozy in the basement by the fireplace, especially when it was cold and dark outside. Mom picked up a book from a nearby table. "Hooray!" The children clapped their hands when they saw it was The Little House on the Prairie book. Mom read a few pages and then stopped. "Do you know that when I was a little girl, my grandmother cooked her food with a fire in her big black kitchen stove? In the winter, the heat felt good, but in the summertime, it was almost unbearable. There was also a little shed with a cold spring running through it. That was my grandmother's refrigerator. Did you hear what I just read about Laura and Mary? They had to put their food in the spring, too." The children nodded their heads. "I wish we lived in the old times. It would have been so much fun," Diane mused as she looked at the pictures in the book. "Me too," Angela emphatically added. "We could go everywhere barefooted and never worry about having to put shoes on. I run all over town barefooted, even when it is cold." A mischievous grin spread across Brian's face. Mom's voice grew firm. "Brian, you need to wear your shoes. One of these days you might get sick. There are always consequences when we don't listen." The family loved going to church, but there was a gas shortage developing. Fuel prices were skyrocketing, and long lines formed at the gas pumps. One day, Sister Mary approached Dad and Mom after church. "I know the gas prices and shortage have been hard on your family. I've been thinking, since we live so close to each other, perhaps your family could ride with me on Sunday mornings." Dad and Mom looked at each other. "That is a very generous offer, Sister Mary. We would be honored to go with you to church." The next Sunday morning, Dad, Mom, and the children piled into the old Rambler. "Good morning, children," Mary smiled from the driver's seat. She was perched on a pillow, straining to see above the steering wheel. Mary soon settled on looking through the steering wheel in order to see the road. "Good morning," the children responded. They watched wide-eyed as Mary tramped on the gas pedal. The car jolted out of the alley and everyone lurched forward. Mom grasped the children's hands to keep them from sliding around as the car rocked back and forth. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they arrived at the church safe and sound. With some prodding from Dad, Mary eventually allowed Dad to drive to and from church. Everyone liked the change. Dad enjoyed driving. Mary enjoyed sitting back and relaxing, and the children were happy to have Dad as their driver again. The family was grateful for Mary's generosity in helping them save gas money. Money was tight as the family was expanding. Mary was one of the many who blessed the Fox family over the years.